Hello everyone, my name is Lynn Scanella and welcome to my podcast Fruitful Conversations, where we talk to people who share their stories to teach and inspire us to be better versions of ourselves. Now, if you like thinking and challenging yourself, then you're going to enjoy my talk with the marvellous Mo Fox. As both an artist and business strategist, Mo's worlds constantly coincide. She's a creative strategist who gets hired to help companies think differently and creatively about the wicked, messy problems that they have, and the messier the better. Now, growing up in the ferocious world of advertising, Mo now teaches courses in design thinking, as well as navigating wicked problems and ambiguity, that's a great name, at Macquarie Business School. She works extensively with design thinking. She's the creator of Welcome to Wicked and Studio Thinking, both methodologies that fuse art principles with business strategy to achieve commercial business results. Now, she does this by teaching people how to think differently. And we hear a lot about that today, and to leverage their innate creativity, which she believes is the secret to having a true competitive edge. Mo and I talked about messy, wicked problems, using art and playfulness to create awesome outcomes, Charles Dickens, and what Salvador Dali has for breakfast. Now, if ever there was a time to get creative as businesses and as individuals, this is it. Don't miss out. Enjoy listening to the erudite, smart, and enigmatic Mo Fox. Hello, Mo Fox, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be here, Lynn.
I am so looking forward to our conversation because they are always sprightly. So I'm going to jump right in. Now, you are all about thinking. I know this is one of your very favourite things. So we're going to be talking loads about thinking. So I might just get some definitions out of the way first for people who, who might not understand. In your world, I know that design thinking is very common, but for some of the people listening, they might not know what it is. Can you give us a brief overview?
Sure. So design thinking is basically it's largely used in a business environment. So a lot of businesses have heard about it, but not a lot of people outside of business. And it is pretty much a codified creative process. So it's a process that it's based on collaboration and empathy and creativity and experimentation and iteration. And it's sort of designed to tackle the kind of problems that normal business as usual thinking doesn't do very well. So it's a complement to the way that analytical way that we normally do business thinking. It's much more creative, and we use it largely in areas like innovation and designing services or new products and so on. Although it's starting to move into a strategy area as well.
Okay, which is what, as we said in the intro, you're a creative strategist, so into your space.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's move in. I'll park that for a second. Okay. What then is studio thinking?
Well, studio thinking is an obsession of mine, I guess. And it's actually where I started. Studio thinking is really teaching people to think like an artist. So I have my tagline when I'm developing it is art makes you smart. So basically it's teaching people art and art practices to help them think like themselves, but at a much higher level. It's to bring out their own artistry. So instead of being taught this is a way to think, this is your structure and your formula and follow that, it's re-engaging with who you are and then getting a lot of the crap out of the way so that you can kind of express all of you. But it's based on art principles. So I physically teach art. How to draw structures around drawing or painting or any other art form.
So as an individual then, how do I begin to start thinking more creatively, thinking like that, apart from attending one of your workshops, of course?
Oh, of course. How do you start? Well, you got to be kind of curious
Okay, so that's another question. I mean, why should I care?
Yeah, well, maybe you don't. If people like that, it's a funny thing when I talk to people about it. some people just look at me blankly, and that's absolutely fine. Other people, you know, I was doing all the wicked and the design thinking stuff, and as part of it, I often mention, I used to actually include it a section where I would teach people how to draw professionally within a couple of hours as part of the workshop. Yeah. And the reason that I always did that was because people are really blocked, and they think, you know, I can't do XYZ because I'm not creative. Creative is for special people. You have to have natural talent. You have to yada, yada, yada. And it's such bullshit, because we are all creative. And the question is how. So believing you're creative allows you, you know, so many more doors open for yourself, because you'll take more risks, you'll try more things, you'll believe you can actually do them. And to me, learning art is one way of allowing people to have back their creativity. And it's when I've done it, and even when I've done more business-oriented drawing stuff, like sketching for business, what I find is that everybody has a story. You know, I used to draw, but then when I was 8 years old, my teacher said that wasn't good enough, or they said, the tree wasn't purple, or why are you drawing the dog bigger than you, or your dad's smaller, or anything. And all of a sudden the kids shut down because they've been usually applauded for it.
Yes.
You know, you do such a great drawing. You're a mum. You remember every drawing was a Picasso, right? It was all up on the fridge. They were geniuses.
Sure. Yeah.
And then they get told at some point that they can't do it or it's wrong. And they shut down. And then the schools just keep teaching kids there's a right and wrong way to get the right and wrong answer in the right and wrong subjects, and the arts get closed down and self-expression gets closed down. And by the time I get to meeting them in business, the business is saying, you need to be more creative. Nobody knows how. And they're taking their avatars to work. They're not taking themselves, because they haven't been able to express themselves safely in a public forum where they're going to be judged since they were kids. So I guess the main reason that I would say to do it is because it really reconnects you to yourself. I had people in tears afterwards going, oh, this is amazing, I can do stick figures. And we're talking stick figures. We're not even talking about,
Wow, that talks about a lot of blockage, but it makes so much sense to me that in the way that our business worlds have gone, you have to look a certain way, act a certain way. You know, I see it all the time in my work. You know, when I do my those of you listening who are familiar with my fruit personalities, everybody, predominantly men, think that they should be apples, because the apple is fast and decisive and makes brutal decisions. But with that, if you're, as you say, you're wearing an avatar, you're wearing a coat that doesn't fit, because it doesn't mean that you're being yourself. I wonder I think I know the answer to this, but you've worked with a lot of you've worked with some big companies, you know, Combank and Essential Energy and Unilever and Toyota. You must have entered rooms. You know, you walk in maybe in your connies and your jeans, and you must have entered rooms to a room full of suits with a whole bunch of people with their arms crossed.
Oh God!
Like that.
Times?
How many times? So how do you win their trust when that happens? And you're coming to teach them almost to unlearn stuff.
Yeah. So the first thing I will always do is ask them if they've been, who's been voluntold to be here, because because you got to acknowledge, it's why I love doing the public courses, because nearly everybody on the public course has chosen to come.
Yes.
So you're automatically playing with people who are kind of keen to be there. But if you're walking into a business and doing it, rooms full of engineers, rooms full of middle managers who've got better things to do because they're very important. A lot of technical people. Then they look at you, they sit back, they're kind of looking at you skeptically going, okay, so show us, prove it. Mm-hmm. And the way I win the trust is actually, you know what I do? I play. And I take the piss out of myself, and then I take the piss out of them. And and I pre-frame everything like to within an inch of its life. So everything that I do seems very fluid and playful, but everything that I do has a purpose. There is a serious intent to it. And, there are toys all over the tables. And I dance, I'm dancing all the way through, and people kind of look at me sus at the beginning, but it's usually, if I have a 2 or 3 day workshop, by morning tea, most people are there. And I learn
most people are softening. Yeah.
And I learn their names and I listen. So I'm very present. And the stuff I do is relevant. So that, if I set it up well enough, they can see that regardless of what they're doing and what they want to achieve, there is something that they could do better that they're not getting from the approaches that they usually try. And I think most people find it really seductive. The thought of being themselves, the thought of being allowed to be themselves, genuinely themselves. Yeah. That's nectar.
For sure. For sure. That is a gift. You're right. Seductive is a great word, because I see in corporate all the time the desire to be seen to be professional and on the way up the ladder and doing the right thing and knowledgeable and all those things that they're supposed to be, instead of just, as you say, playing to get the right solutions.
Yeah. And it's and you can see them light up, like over the period of a couple of days. Even over the first day, once you've got them in and they're laughing and they can start playing with very serious business problems, but do it in a way they've never done it before. And it's the playfulness. More than anything else that I do, the playfulness is the thing that has the impact. And they go away not only with a bunch of tools that they can use, because, we spend a lot of time on that, but having had an experience that it doesn't have to be so solemn, you can be serious without being solemn. You can be, and when you play, you engage so much with other people, and you can bring more of yourself to the party. And the more you bring of you to the work you do, the more fulfilling it feels, because, you feel like you've contributed as opposed to just acted like a cog for the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you've contributed your part, you feel like part of a team. And what I love about that is, especially if you're using play and coming at a problem in a really different way, is that everyone has such different perspectives. Yeah. But I find that so many people are reluctant to bring those perspectives out on the table. Certainly as women, my experience is that so many women will go, "Oh, I had that idea, I just didn't want to say it."
In case they look stupid.
Yeah. So you're giving them permission to be themselves in clearly a very safe space. So I guess now then is a good time to ask you about your wicked problems. Define. Well, I don't know why, but wicked and you just seem to go together, Mo.
That's a compliment. Thank you.
Define a wicked problem. How are they different to a normal problem?
Well, a wicked problem, if a normal problem, you usually, I cut them into 3. So I say a simple problem, you know what the problem is, you know what the answer is, and you're just following the dots, bouncing ball to get to it. So it's already sorted. A complex problem, which is the one that we usually think we're dealing with, is you don't know, it's like a puzzle. You don't know what the problem is or the solution, but you can work it out. So, like building a car, or your technical problems, engineering kind of problems are complex. Simple problems are, baking a cake, anything that you've got a recipe to. But wicked problems, you don't know what the problem is, you don't know what the answer is, and you're never gonna. Because they mutate. So they've got lots of ambiguity, there's lots of chaos, it's always changing, there's loads of people there, and everybody's got a different opinion. And, they're just really messy. They're messy, and they're subjective. And so it's really hard to get a fix on them. And the thing with them, examples, raising a child, having a relationship, building a career, managing your micromanaging boss, getting a high-performing team together, figuring out whose career you're going to focus on if one of you wants to move to another city. All of those really human problems that are where the value is. Building a great culture, innovating, getting engagement, great clients, so all of that.
Okay, so not a problem that has almost a beginning and an end.
Yeah,
so I need to fix the car. If I follow this process, I'm going to be able to fix the car. Correct. Pretty much. And along the way, there might be some issues, but I'll find the way through.
Yeah.
But you're talking about very human problems, aren't you, that mutate? Because I was going to say, when you kind of suggested that they couldn't be solved, I was going to say, well, why would you even bother? But
I usually get asked, well, why don't we just turn them into complex problems and then we can solve them?
Yeah, that would make sense. Why not? Because sometimes they can't be.
And it doesn't mean, like, we really need to rethink what the word solve is. And the problem is that when we say problem, when we come up with the word problem, it's binary with solution. Your problem has to have a solution. And the fact that we can't provably solve them, like we can't get rid of them forever, stick them in a box, put them on a shelf, and that's it, doesn't mean you can't get amazing outcomes. You can do all sorts of cool stuff. You can pull somebody out of depression or addiction. You can have an amazing relationship. You can start a new company or a new market or create a fabulous innovation. You can reduce world hunger. You can do all sorts of amazing stuff, but you can't solve it, any more than you can solve a relationship.
Yeah, I really like that, because I admit, so when I first read about your messy, wicked problems, I went, I don't quite get it, but you've now explained it to me really well, because you talked about relationships and there's nothing more messy. Yeah. But you can still have a solid relationship, even though you might not solve it. It's never going to be solved because there's human beings involved. Okay.
And you'd get bored anyway, wouldn't you? I mean,
I would get bored, yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I had a girlfriend of mine and I were walking on the beach a little while ago, and we were discussing our partners, and hers is a really beautiful, kind, loving man who almost throws rose petals in front of her as she walks, And she just looked at me, and we kind of just, did that thing that women do. And she said, and I went, "You're so lucky." And she went, "Look, Lynn, there are two types of men in the world." And I'll say people, because otherwise I'll be pilloried for just referring to men. Two types of people in the world. You have beautiful, kind, and boring, or you have exciting, interesting assholes. And she said, she said, "You've got one and I've got the other." But that, Mo, just to me, that just goes back to who you are and who you're meant to be with, and what floats your boat. But you're right, it doesn't matter what relationship you're in, it will never ever be perfect. So that is a constantly wicked problem. Okay, I got it. Tell me, in a business sense, can you give me, I know we can't just probably tie it all up in a bow, because that's not what you do with wicked problems, but can you give me an example of a wicked problem in a business sense that you were able to get some really good outcomes for? Yeah. You don't have to mention a company name, obviously.
So, gosh, nearly all of the stuff that I get hired to do is wicked. And the great thing about it, because you can't solve it, and this is actually the relief piece for most people working in this space, with a wicked problem, you either end up making stuff better or worse. So the tracker that you're looking for is, have you made it noticeably better, and how do you measure that? One example would be, I got asked to, oh God, sorry, no, I didn't have an example. No, they're all flooding in. With a group, an IT department, some of whom wanted to be there, some didn't. And the brief was they needed to build a better culture, and they wanted to. The brief I got was that because it was a group of basically engineers, they were all very focused on problem solving, and so they were shutting things down too fast. So they wanted to get their group to be more collaborative and to think more creatively, obviously, because that's usually underpins everything, and to listen to their customers more, instead of just being arrogant and assuming they knew the answer and just shutting it down, and to be more curious and ask a lot more questions. So it's a real mindset shift piece.
Yep.
And it was interesting. We managed to do 250 people. I managed to do 250 people, in some in more depth than others, and give them lots of stuff to practice and play with. But because they had a common language, it was fascinating. They started to change how they did their everyday stuff. So what was interesting for me was the things that I was measuring weren't necessarily coming through, but the culture just shifted. So by the end of, a couple of months when we'd been playing together, they were having a completely different way of solving problems. So instead of going up and, sitting in their cubes and just working on something by themselves because it was faster, they would go to a whiteboard, grab a couple of buddies on the way, and start to play collaboratively and get other input. They would spend time speaking. When somebody came to them with a problem, they wouldn't immediately shut them down. They'd start listening and asking questions and trying to find out real issue was. So they'd spend a lot, and they were seeing real results with it, and they became much more playful. So they started buying toys in order to experiment, and instead of just doing that usual here's the problem, we've got to send a brief out, a tender out, they would try to run prototypes in order to figure out what the problem was. And they started getting feedback from their customers and partners saying, what's happened to you guys? Like, this is a different company now.
Nice.
What Kool-Aid are you drinking?
Great.
That was kind of neat. And they loved it. And they were having so much more fun. So much more fun.
Yeah. And I think everyone listening, that's the people that have jobs at the moment, and the people that are looking at changing their jobs, perhaps due to the, as we're recording, we're in current pandemic. Everyone wants to have fun at work. Everyone wants to enjoy their work. Nobody wants to say, I am simply there to feed the family. Yep. You might be, but surely if you can have some fun with it, then it's so much more fulfilling for you as a person, and it's fulfilling for your team, and it's fulfilling at the end of the day. You're going to get better results for the organisation.
Totally. I mean, the more fun and the more playful you are, the looser you are, the more you'll experiment, the more you'll have a go at stuff. It's just, the more discretionary effort you'll put in. So, there's such a direct tie to the outcomes that companies get by that goes straight back to culture, doesn't it? So, which is your territory.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and yours, because so if you're saying you work with this company over a couple of months, would you normally say it takes a period of time to make that culture shift?
Yes, it does, because
nothing is going to be instant.
Well, nothing, because if you think about it, the major shifts in a culture, you can give people a process or methodology and a bunch of tools, and they can use them, and it'll have a bit of an uptick. But I usually look at that space as being a mixture of, if you see a target, a target, a bullseye thing, what's it called?
A target,
a bullseye. The outer ring, the way that we usually come in is the tools and the methodologies, and that's what people like because they're easy to digest.
Yes.
But underneath that is behaviors, and that's habits of behavior. So under stress, those are harder to do, and that might be questioning or your ability to interview or to facilitate or to whatever the skill is. Think visually, but inside, in the middle, in the heart of the bullseye, that's your habits of mind. That's your mindset. And you don't really get the shift until you shift the mindset. And it's unconscious. So until and it's totally influenced by its environment. So that takes a while. And that's driven by how safe you feel and how much you play with it. So it takes some time. You'll get some results immediately from the tools and so on, but the real shifts, that's
come later.
The way you see the world.
Yeah, okay. So this is a huge, it always reminds me of what a huge responsibility we have as leaders. So not that I'm consciously leading a team at the moment, but for those who lead teams, the responsibility they have to be able to bring in this kind of different thinking. So if you take, if we move away, say, from the business sphere, as an individual, how do I attack my big, wicked problems?
Yeah.
if I'm on my own. Or maybe what I should be asking you, Mo Fox, is how do you attack your wicked problems when you have them? Do you use the same processes or the same
Absolutely.
methodology? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, to the point with, I have to practice what I preach, and I didn't really get
Yes.
the stuff that I was preaching until I really forced myself, when it was really deeply uncomfortable, to sit in it for a while. And I'm okay, I'm so comfortable with other people's messes. When you're with your own mess, own mess, man, that sucks.
It does. It does indeed. And you can't, to use a cliche, you can't see the forest for the trees often, and you need
buried in emotions.
Yeah, because we're human beings.
Yeah. So do I approach them the same way? Yeah, I do, because the principles are, first of all, you've got to understand that the problem's messy, and that it's about perspectives and other people's points of view, that emotions aren't real, they're feedback, they're something that's notifying you that something is either going really well or not well for you.
Yeah.
They give you choices and so on. So you embrace the messiness of that. Then you focus on what you want to create, like what's your outcome, not what's the problem. So, if you're in a relationship and, or whether it's with an asshole partner, or a troublesome partner, or child, or a micromanaging boss or something, that's all still relationship regardless. That it's a dynamic that you're looking at, and that you've only got one point of view. And so it's instead of focusing on they need to see that they're wrong and I'm right, and how do I get them to not only fix it, but then recognize how right I am and apologize, groveling to me, so that I can feel thoroughly validated. Yeah, I know, not any bells at all. You start working on, well, what do you want to create? What kind of a relationship do you want to have with them, and what would it take to get there? And then you just start trying stuff out until it works. So it's more fluid, and I use it all the time, and it's not always easy. It's
not, and it requires a great level of self-awareness. And in a previous conversation, we've talked about questioning, and I think I said to you at the time, one of my favorite ways is to question myself, because it always takes me into a very uncomfortable space. But imagine if you were wrong. Unimaginable. Imagine if this point of view is not the right one, or is not the one that is going to work. And I think the more of that we do, the better our relationships are. And I think one thing that this pandemic has given us over these first half of 2020 is more time to be with our loved ones, and more time to practice all that stuff. Under pressure. I tell you, the people that are working, that have been working from home, mum and dad, or mum and mum, around the dining table with their 4 children homeschooling, man, those people are straight to heaven.
No, absolutely.
Talk about sticky problems. I
look at it, and I'm continually saying, I adore my children. I loved my time raising them. Thank God that's not me.
Yeah, I know. Indeed. So let me ask you, you mix art and business. Do you often feel confused?
I'm always confused.
Because you clearly don't fit into any sort of stereotypical box that I can find. Was that a conscious decision not to fit in a box, do you think, growing up?
Probably. But, it was really weird, because I probably did that, the I'm special, I'm different thing, which many of us do, whilst desperately trying to conform at the same time. So I think that's probably the thing that's confused me the most. Trying to be, and then when I let go of all of that and just decided to not do what everybody else was doing on purpose, that life became a lot easier. But yeah, the confusion for me was it wasn't the art and the business piece was frustrating until I figured out that there was such a link between them. So and it's really interesting. I'd hired somebody a while back, and this was just typical of the advice I've had all the way through my business. Was he was reviewing my website, wanted to redo my profile, and all the rest of it. I said, awesome. And the first thing he came back with was, well, look, it's nice that you do all the art, but frankly, it's not relevant and it's not corporate. I think you should take it off your site and save it for Instagram. Have a different site if you want to, but you've got to look professional. And it just totally missed the point for me, because if you are, the business stuff that I do comes out of a deep creative space, not just a strategy space, but the thing that makes the difference and the thing that is missing in business is that genuinely creative piece, not just business creativity, human creativity, which is why I do it through art. It's because creativity, it's such a muddy word these days.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been hijacked as a thing. I wouldn't use it for years. So anyway, so that's where the art's important.
The art's critical. Was there an event or a turning point that you suddenly had an epiphany that art can be used in business? Because for most artists, there's a lot of pressure to commercialize their work, and most artists I know would struggle to do that. But you do it successfully. So was there something that one day it just went, this exploded?
Oh, absolutely. I was in a drawing class with the amazing Michael Heron over in Willoughby. And if you can get into a class of his, go. The guy's a genius. And he was doing a demo. We were sketching in charcoal, doing life drawing or something. And he was doing a demo. And, it was just nauseatingly easy for him. He would just za. And we were all watching him kind of going slowly greener with envy. And he was just chatting. He said, as artists, all we're really doing is trying to scribble in a way that makes sense. And I had all of these light bulbs go off, and it was like, oh, yeah, we're all just making it up as we go along, whether it's leadership or in life or in anything. So. Yeah. And then I started making the link between, well, actually anything that you learn as a discipline in drawing, and then I expanded it out to all of the other arts, you can use in any space of life. It's like going back to first principles, and the techniques, you can cross-reference them. Like, for example, if you're trying to draw something accurately, we tend to draw from our head. We get crap drawings because we're drawing what we assume is there. One of the ways that you can draw accurately is by, instead of drawing the thing that you're looking at, like, the cup, you draw the odd spaces that your brain doesn't recognize. You draw the spaces in between, the negative space.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really accurate because your brain can't say, that's the handle, I'll draw a handle. It draws, well, there's this strange bit and it's got a straight side. And that's, so you get a real picture from it. And it is like, look at the context of a conversation you're having, because the meaning is in the context. Look at the context of a meeting. The meaning is in the context. It's not in the meeting itself.
It's not in the detail. Tell me though, was there, so that in that class, you suddenly went, we just need to scribble to make sense. Aha. And this is how I'm going to apply it to, was it a new business at the time, or?
Oh, I was busy. It was, setting up a consultancy business. And then a couple of mates asked me to teach them how to draw. So I worked out a drawing system. It was based on some stuff by Betty Edwards, drawing on the right side of the brain. So I took that and started to do that as a chunk and then debrief it into life skills or business skills. And I played with that for a while and then slowly started to integrate it. It was actually where I started my business was in doing the studio thinking piece. But I got frustrated because I'd get hired to run workshops, but they were kind of like doing team building drumming sessions and they didn't lead anywhere. Whereas for me, they were there was just so much more that you could do with them. So at that point, then design thinking came along, which for me was kind of studio thinking light in a way, because it was,
yes,
it allowed me to take all of the learning and put it into that space. And then the wicked problems were when I was looking at art, creating art as a messy problem and looking at the direct link to strategy. That's when the whole wicked stuff was born.
right.
And wicked really is a why for design thinking. Wicked is a kind of a problem that gives you the why for needing to have a creative approach, which is different to the approaches that most businesses take.
Okay. And why your obsession with thinking?
Because it's fun.
What drives it? I mean, because I know people that would say, thinking, I don't have time to think. I get up every day, I go and do my job, and I feed the family and I watch the news. What is it that just drives you to be constantly wanting new thoughts and new learning? Is it something, did it come from your family? Is it just something you think is innate in you?
Yeah, I think it's, okay. So I do think it's innate. I think it's possibly born. I spend a lot of time reflecting. So maybe it's like personality stuff, whether it's the introvert piece, massive introvert, or the HSP, highly sensitive person profile piece. So there's all of that. And I would have grown up feeling like an outsider. So there was a lot of, I'm a
thinking time.
Spend a lot of time watching, take a lot of stuff in, and then I have to process it all. So in order to make sense of the world, I have to spend a lot of time reflecting and processing. So I think it's a defense or survival mechanism, maybe. But
yeah, maybe. I'm not a psychologist, but it sounds like it could be. And in my speak, it's your strong lime that needs to, and I think all of us need more of this, to take things away. And I speak to myself, because over the years, I probably haven't reflected often or as deeply as I should on some of the things that I did. Like when I backed the car into a pole, it was just, oh, well, silly me, never mind, and just keep moving. You should probably stop and think about some of these things. So I think these are good qualities to have, to stop and think and reflect, because that makes us be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, and it makes and it helps us understand what else is going on around us. So for me, I think it's always been about, how do I make sense of the world? How do I make sense of this situation? How do I make sense of me, of the people around me, of the dynamics? Because I'm always trying to get to, what's the essence of something, which is why I'm so attracted to the messiness around me. I know it's beautiful. So what is the beauty? What is the essence that's in the middle of all of that? And so that requires me to, I spend a lot of time looking and just absorbing, I guess. So the making sense thing keeps me sane. But it's also fun. I mean, new ideas, woo, it's toys. So, there's partially a self-indulgence with it as well.
I think yes, I like to learn. The magic is in the learning, I think. Now, listen, you did an English Lit degree.
I did.
How on earth did that help you in the business world?
Oh, I think, well, for me, I swear that was probably better than any business degree in terms of developing my sense of strategy. Because, if you think about it, English literature is all, particularly if you're studying it. So if you're reading it, awesome. And if you're studying it, you are forced to pull apart subtext constantly. So you're constantly looking at who are the people, what makes them tick, what makes them do what they do, what are their motivations, and how can you understand that from a number of different perspectives. So somebody is never black and white, bad or good or any of that. They're complex. Great literature is full of complex characters, and it's all about understanding not just what is said, but what is not said. So, reading between the lines and subtext and nuance, and anyway, all the deliciousness and messiness of humans.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense when you say it like that.
And the dynamics of groups and relationships.
Yes.
So as soon as you see that, and usually there's a historical context that you're looking at as well. So if you then pull it out to, well, what's the author saying, and blah, blah, blah. And there's the discipline of something is well written, it is really well structured. So there's this, you absorb language and so much of your thinking and your ability to think well is determined by how sophisticated your vocabulary and your use of language is, but it's also structure. So if a story isn't stacking, you get frustrated with it, so you're constantly looking for what has to be true for this to make sense. So it teaches you on many, many levels, and it teaches you to write, and that teaches you how to structure your thinking and blah, blah, blah.
Right. So kids coming out of school straight to an English lit degree, you reckon?
Oh man, it's so underrated.
You would never think so, Mo. You would never think so. But listening to you now, I'm sold. It makes so much sense. What favourite books from that era? Give me a couple that you studied.
Okay.
Because they would have been classics.
Yeah, they were. So I wrote my thesis on Dickens. I love Dickens because he is just so clever and he captures characters so beautifully in a way that, when you watch the TV versions, they take out his language, whereas his descriptions are just exquisite. So Dickens, you can read any page and just laugh. And he is so humane, he's so much about, so full of heart and so much about people and the absurdities of humanity. So I love Dickens for that. T.S. Eliot, and so specific Dickens would be Great Expectations, because it was like, one of his latest. And it's just, there isn't a spare word in it. It's just exquisite.
Yes. Okay.
The others tend to be quite long. Eliot, because he is T.S. Eliot, because his use of language, he's quite clinical, so he doesn't have the heart that Dickens has, but his use of language is just exquisite. Like the surgical use of language, the way he puts it together, it's just, makes me go weak with envy.
Right, you get it.
Funny about this.
I love how excited you get about the things that you're passionate about. So I'm going to just bring this right down and change the topic and say, I know that you've had a couple of massive or significant bouts of depression.
I'm going to get excited about those too.
No, I'm changing it. Don't get excited. I'm trying to shift the mood.
Okay, I'm going to segue left. Okay, go.
Segue seriously into depression, only because it's so much on the rise over the last several years, and it seems to be so much a part of society. Some people suffer from event-induced. Some people, perhaps like yourself, suffer from clinical depression. All we know is it's one big ugly bastard to have to deal with. Yep. So I wondered if you'd be kind enough to share some of your insights into one or two times that you suffered. How it started, how you coped.
So for me, they were really different. The first one, and they were decades ago, thankfully. In both cases, I think that I found myself feeling trapped. So for me, I think one of the reasons that I can come up with ideas so readily, so easily, like a dog shaking off a swim, is that I think I'm terrified of being trapped. And when I feel trapped in some sense and a whole pile of other things happen and I feel repressed, that tends to start me down a loop. So if I can't see a way out of a situation and I feel personally repressed, that's not it's not a healthy combo for me. The thing after the first one was, I went and saw psychologists, and it was my interaction with them. This was when I was in London. My interaction with the medical fraternity was unfortunately awful until right at the end. and I was put on antipsychotics and all sorts of stuff that have had a lasting impact on me, and I shouldn't have been. So that was awful. And I came out of it by getting angry, actually. I got really angry. And then, by starting to feel again, I finally clawed my way out. The horrible thing for me about that was that I had absolutely no sense of who I was anymore. I'd be putting it together and then watching it fall apart like a sandcastle with a wave washing over it. It was awful. But when I came back, so the next bout was maybe 10 years later, and I was in Australia. And the thing that surprised me was I never thought it could possibly happen to me again. I was so resoundingly healthy and so much stronger after the first depression that it didn't occur to me that it would happen again. So when I went down, and in this case it was because my marriage was falling apart, and I had been again repressing myself massively in order to conform and try to be, fix everything and all the rest of it, all the mess you go through. That was really ugly. But the thing that happened the second time, and I had kids this time, so I couldn't just sit in it in the same way, was the biggest thing for me was knowing that I would get through it because I had before. And the first time I went through it, I kept thinking, this is just mental flu. It's mental flu. What you feels real, but it's not. It's a warped, distorted perspective. And I would hold on to that like a life raft. And the second time was different. I didn't do the drugs until I went on to SAMI. That was a real saving grace. Again, interactions with the medical fraternity in this particular space were not particularly helpful. But that's when I went back to art, was actually in the midst of the depression, because I tried everything else and the way out. And that's when I kind of went, okay, I have to.
So you'd gone away from art at that time?
Yeah, well, I'd started, I've always been, arty, whatever that means, or creative. And I did it for my HSC, dreadfully, awful. I'd played with it since, but didn't really have a great deal of faith in my abilities as an artist. And, for some reason, I picked up the notion that it was a nice to have, but it was a nice ladylike thing to have. But, if I could make curtains, that would be good. So I didn't take it particularly seriously. And then in this second bout of depression, it was my way out.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot to be said for art then, and art takes many, many forms. So
there's a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way that I highly recommend to anybody who's kind of wanting to have a dabble in it. I spent months doing that one, week by week, and lessons and classes, and it was great therapy.
Okay. All right. That sounds great. Okay. Mo, I could listen to you and all your wisdom for hours. But we are running out of time. What's your key message for our listeners? What do you want them to take out of you and your wicked problems and your studio thinking?
Oh, that anything worthwhile that we do is going to be really messy. So instead of avoiding it, find a way to embrace and revel in it. And the way through those really messy problems isn't by analyzing your way through to the right answer. You got to let go of being right. They're messy. There is no right answer. So be genuine and be as creative as possible in your approach. Try stuff out, see what works. Does it make it better? Do some more of that. Does it make it worse? Cool, do something else. But life is a creative process, and the messes are a necessary part of getting the most out of it. So, just enjoy it. If you can, just enjoy it.
It is it's just part of humanity, isn't it? It's part of the whole I hate using the word journey. Come on, think of a better word than journey. It's part of the whole.
It's hard
Cycle.
because you can't use it. They've nicked journey and path.
They've nicked journey. Path. Yes, path. Laneway. Aisle. Not my aisle.
It's just the way it is. Yes, but it is part of the whole experience. How about that?
It's part of the whole experience. It is indeed. Now, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, Mo, where can we find you? What's your website?
Easy. It's mofox.com. So mofox.com.
Great. And on that, we'll see information on your workshops.
Yeah.
Mo does both virtual webinars and face-to-face presenting. You also, I know you've got 1,000 books unpublished, but you do have one book published, don't you? It's Wicked Wisdom, Creative Approaches to the Problems That Drive Us Crazy. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that and where we can find it?
Yes, you can find it on my website, either as a hardback or, not hardback, physical atoms copy,
Yes.
or as a digital version. And that was actually an art project that had thinking thrown at it, and it's very much about how to cultivate a creative mindset. So it's the stuff that when you're dealing with the messiness, the things that trip us up, like, so it's full of aphorisms and stories. It's a light read, but I'm told that it's very useful, and I loved making it. So it's a project dear to my heart.
Beautiful. That sounds perfect. And just before you go, did you hear about that artist that died recently?
No. Which one?
Too Many Strokes. It's funny. The artist who died, the painter, he had too many strokes.
Oh, God.
Oh, come on. All right, let me try another one.
I'm thinking it's a joke. Was that a dirty joke? Was that?
No, I'm going to try again. What does Salvador Dali have for breakfast?
What?
A bowl of cereal. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. Thank you, Mo Fox. You've been amazing. See you soon.
See you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.
And thank you, everybody, so much for listening. Now, if you like what you've heard, you may like my program Working with People You Just Don't Get. So in this, we determine what your behavioural preference is for: apple, mango, lime or banana. Once we do that, we look at the strengths and challenges of each and how we can work more effectively together. Because when we do, we have less stress, we have greater productivity, and we get better results all round. Now, the program comes in many forms. You can choose a webinar. You may like a video with a live Zoom Q&A after it. If you're all back in the workplace together, there's a lovely video training series that you can run yourself. Perhaps you'd like to book me post-COVID for a face-to-face workshop or a conference gig, or maybe just take a look at the book, Bite Me at Other Do's and Don'ts of Dealing with Our Differences. Now, all this and more can be found on my website, lynscanella.com.au, and you can also do a taster of the quiz there to get a feel for what you are. Now, if you've liked what you've heard, please like us, subscribe, leave a review. That would be awesome. I am on Facebook, Insta and LinkedIn, so please join me there so we can stay as connected as possible in this weird and wonderful world in which we live. Respect, connect, thrive. I'm Lynn Scanella, and this has been Fruitful Conversations.